Helps if I unmute my microphone. I've done that 2 weeks in a row now. Welcome to the show, Blazor fans. We're going to talk about some not so much news this week. Not a lot of news going on, so I'm going to skip past the kind of news segment for the most part. We'll talk about the big merge here in a sec. I was giving some people a little bit of time to connect. This should be good enough to get going, though. We'll get more people jumping in when we start actually writing some code. So first thing is, let's switch views here. Let's go into full screen mode. I don't know if you guys caught this yet. Depends on where you hang out and get your news. This was on Twitter the other day, and I reposted this in the Gitter channel, but Blazor has moved repos. They've been merged into the main ASP.NET Core repo now. So it used to be under github.com/ASP.NET/Blazor, and now everything is right here under ASP.NET Core source components. So they've been merged into the full repo for ASP.NET Core. So for me, that's pretty interesting news. I'm gonna say this is all speculation at the moment, but my opinion is this is a good sign. So I think if you're merging something like a big framework like Blazor into the main repo, that probably means there's some longevity there. It's a lot higher. Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the show. Glad to have you watching. Yeah, I was just saying the merging Razor into the main ASP.NET Core repository, I think that's a hard thing to undo, so I think that's a good sign for Blazor fans like me that are wanting to see Blazor be a big part of ASP.NET Core. I think it'd be hard to rip that out, so it's probably a stepping stone towards Blazor on WebAssembly being part of the official frameworks. That didn't lead to any new information as far as when it could be released or anything like that. We do know that Razor Components is coming in ASP.NET Core 3.0, and Razor Components is the server-side implementation of Blazor. So I think that may have something to do with it as well. But the entire, as you can see here, Blazor has been pushed or pulled into the ASP.NET Core repository. This also means all of the issues are going to be over here under ASP.NET Core. So all the issues are being migrated. I don't know if they're there yet. I haven't checked yet. We could see if there's anything in here now. It looks like they've migrated stuff over here already. So issues are being brought over. A lot of the history is supposed to be coming over as well. So if you've been tracking issues or posting issues, then it has a new home. So go to the ASP.NET Core repository now for all your Blazor issues and latest bits and all that stuff. So that was big news for me this week. That's the only real news I have. Last week on the show, we did some machine learning exercises, and we walked through this taxi fare prediction model. And in the documentation, there were some errors with where these code blocks show up. And a lot of the code blocks were out of sequence. A few were missing. John Alexander over on the ML.NET docs team has fixed all of those issues. Matter of fact, he was actually on top of those issues before I was able to even report those to him. So they're all fixed and they're all in there. It's a great tutorial to walk through if you didn't get to do it last week. Check that out. ML.NET is very new but very cool machine learning framework for .NET developers. So it does work with server-side Blazor. If you didn't get to tune into the show last week, we did get it to work with server-side Blazor. However, client-side Blazor still has some issues. I think it's due to Mono for WebAssembly. the runtime just doesn't support all the things that ML.NET needs, so it just doesn't work. It was kind of expected, but it was nice to see the server-side version of this work as a service in... well, thanks for coming back, Loop USA 87, and checking out the show today. There is recordings of the previous show up and highlights and whatnot, and code as well, if you want to check those things out. The code does work. There's a service to load into Blazor and use ML.NET that way, so it's cool stuff. Docs are fixed, so thanks, John Alexander, for that one. Also this week, I've got another demo app by Mr. Magoo. We're actually going to load this one up here and check it out. I also pushed back some contributions to this because it was such a really well-structured demo. I thought it was a good example of all the different types of bindings that are done in Blazor. So we've got cascading values, just simple value bindings, bindings with callbacks and refreshing the page and so on. And this is very important to me because I was having some real big issues with child components updating the state of the parent component. And I'll show an example of that using his examples here. So Mr. Magoo in the chat room, I'll show this off in a minute, and we'll talk about the syntax highlighting that he's referring to. This is a brand new example project. You can see it's just been a couple days of work here, so it's being updated at the moment as well, and I think it's coming along nicely. It's a really nice example. We'll dig into that in just a minute. Before I dig into that, I just want to talk about what we'll demo afterwards. There is a demo of building tabs that was in the release notes of Blazor 070. And I built that out on the show last week using cascading values. And I wanted to go into more detail on that and do some advanced component activities. And the reason I did that is I wrote an article, and the article talks about building this stepwise form. And I did this with Telerik components a while back. So Kendo UI here, and it's composed of a couple different UI components. I have a progress bar, I have a tab strip, and there's validation and previous and next buttons and things like that, so you can walk through a form and fill it in piece by piece. The main thing being this tab strip, I want to be able to recreate this entire stepwise form in Blazor at some point. And I was looking at the current implementation of the tab strip, which was very basic. All it lets you do is tab and change between tabs. In order to do things programmatically, like add a button and be able to click through to the next tab, for instance, that requires another level of API. And we currently haven't seen anything this complex as far as components go being built in. So I wanted to see how that would be done, and we'll talk about that today. So this will be our next step, is to get closer to a stepwise form like this by enhancing tabbed components. But for now, let's go back to the example from Mr. Magoo and look at how these Blazor bindings take place. And this will help us out with the tabs later. I've already gone into this repo here and cloned it, and I have it up and running here. For the most part, everything is in a page. Underneath of pages, you'll find all of the various examples. Not sure what changes I've got pending here. Let me double check this real quick. Trying to remember where the compare with unmodified is. I may have just put some white space or something here by accident. Just want to make sure we're on the same version that everybody sees on GitHub. Make sure I wasn't hacking away on this before we get started. Yeah, it looks like it might just be some white space that has changed. And I refactored a little piece of code here out. So I'll leave that the way it is. So let's take a look. Let's run this app and see what's going on inside, and then we'll look at some of the code behind it and understand how all these bindings happen. So I'll load this guy up, and this is a server side. Let me double check, make sure I'm saying the right thing. No, actually this is a client side Blazor app. So this is Blazor running on WebAssembly. It would have the same properties if it was running on the server. It just, the server ones tend to run a little bit faster at the current moment. That's why I was kind of saying that, is it took a little while to spin up. So let's start out. We got a simple cascading value. Oh, this is the older version. This is not the latest bits. So let me go back here and see if I'm on a different branch or what's going on. It's been beautified, let's just say that, since this has happened. Let me see if I've got another project here. Let me close this one out. That is the older one. Blazor Bindings 2. Here we go. I ended up with 2 of these projects somehow. All right. So this is the more modernized version. So let's take a look at what we had before, if we can still pull that up. This was the initial version of it, and it's been improved quite a bit visually since then. So let's close this guy out. Let's load the latest bits here. I'm going to Control F5 to get this project up and running. And got an error. I've seen this error before. Let's talk about this for a moment. This is an odd one, and it seems to be that Blazor can't handle, there's some issue that's open here, issue 261, where you can't have a debug and a release folder on disk at the same time, which is really odd. But what we can do is come in here and do open in File Explorer. I'm going to come down to Blazor Bindings, and then under binary, you can't have these two folders up and running. Tofu Lock, thanks for following the show, man. Appreciate it. So we're going to drop these, delete these out, and then I need to run one time in debug mode, and that should fix that error screen that we just saw. I'm not sure where that release is coming from because I never compiled this in release mode. So Mr. Magoo says, get used to deleting those folders out. That's a common problem right now. So, and then Loop USA has written a small tool to automatically delete those out. It seems like a pain. Hopefully they'll fix that issue soon, and we won't need to have hacks that work around it like that. So here's the examples now. I know Mr. Magoo's working on some even better syntax highlighting here, which is really nice. I also added some buttons here to help hide and show this, so you can kind of move these out of the way if you don't want to see the actual code and you just want to focus on what's happening. So the example is all about binding data in Blazor. So what we can do on, let's see, this is the simple cascading value or one-way binding. We can click on these child and parent controls. So I've got my parent control here in blue, child control here in yellow. When I click on these checkboxes, you'll see a little highlight in yellow showing which ones were updated. So the parent control is bound to the child control. However, the child control, when I click the checkbox, doesn't bind back to the parent. So this is just simple one-way binding. So we have an input with a bind parent value, and that does this. And the other checkbox is inside of a child component, and it's also binding to parent value, but there's an issue where it doesn't update the parent control. Now, there's also a two-way binding that we can do with cascading values. So if we click on the parent control, both checkboxes update, and if we click on the child, you can see both checkboxes update. So this is more, it depends on what your scenario is that you're trying to do. This is probably the more common way that you'd be doing things in Blazor, is having values update in a two-way binding type of fashion. So there's code in here to see how to do that with cascading values. And then we have more simple binding examples here. It's another one-way example. You see that the parent and child update independently if I'm clicking on the child control. And then we can add that two-way binding functionality with the same syntax there as well. So that's how these examples go. The one I want to really focus on, though, is this final one. I believe this is where I was having some issues with my own code. So if we look at this example, I'm going to do value binding with callback, two-way value binding and no refresh. So I think this is the one that was causing me a headache. And if we click the parent control, the child control binds to it. If we click the child control, we're not getting a bind back. And if you look at the way the components are structured, there actually should be a two-way binding update here. So we have two components on the page. We have an input, and we have a checkbox control, which is a custom component that has a value with a bind property on it. So this is a custom binding that's been created, and it should allow us to bind to a value in a two-way fashion with the parent controls on the page. There's an issue right now in Blazor that doesn't allow that two-way binding to update the UI, so that the actual value gets updated. So the value is being applied, and the UI just isn't refreshing to show that binding happening. So we have to kind of force a refresh here to make that update happen. So that's what this example shows. This final example shows how to fix it. This is a current workaround right now that you have to use to make two-way binding on a custom component actually work. So if we click on parent component, click on child component, they're actually updating in sync now. Nothing's changed on the actual controls here themselves. Where the fix comes into place is we're using a property to bind against a local value. And then when that property changes, we're invoking the StateHasChanged method on the page. So StateHasChanged isn't getting triggered where it should be. So we have to kind of work around it in that way. And I saw a much more elaborate way of doing the StateHasChanged workaround that involved dependency injection and a whole bunch of other stuff. So this way of doing it is much easier. So let's actually look at the code on that one for a second. Let's see, Mr. Magoo's got some comments here on this as well. This is his demo that I'm showing off, so let's see what he's got to say. You have a new example where you write a getter and setter on the parent value and call StateHasChanged on the setter, so there's no callback, so you can make it even simpler, I suppose. So that's awesome. Hopefully they fix this stuff soon. Again, you know, Blazor's alpha, beta type of software, so these things are expected, but they can still cause you to run a bunch of time that's unnecessary. So I've got, on this page, we've got this input. So it's just a simple input control that's bound to a parent value. And then if we scroll down, we have the checkbox number 6, which has the bind value attribute. So let's look at checkbox 6. So on checkbox 6, all of this is a component that has a label and an input, and it has some custom properties or parameters here. So we have this local value that gets bound to the actual component. And then we have the parameter that's shown or displayed in the control itself. So if we look here, this bind value is that property, and then the action value changed is required to get that bind dash syntax. So without that onChanged event, you can only say value and get one-way binding. With the onChanged event, it's triggered automatically, and you can call bind dash. So that's where that comes from. And we're using this this kind of workaround here to trigger StateHasChanged. So when this parent value gets bound, the local value gets updated, and then StateHasChanged gets called through this button click refresh here. So we're calling StateHasChanged. So we're kind of forcing the StateHasChanged to happen on the parent when it should happen automatically. So that's about the overview of that project and how it works and what it's intended to be used for. It's a really nice setup that Mr. Magoo's put together. So hopefully folks find that as useful as I did, because they're going to need it if they want to do the next project that we're working on, and that is working with these tabs. So I talked about this a little bit earlier. We're going to take this tab, work towards a tab strip that's a little more. Mr. Magoo says, "Gotta go." So thanks for stopping by, Mr. Magoo, and thanks for the great demo. I'll keep an eye on it, and if there's anything else I can try to add to that, I will. And I'll put the links to that in the show notes for everybody to find in just a bit. So we're going to work towards better tabs here. Like I said, I wrote an article about how to build a stepwise form, and one of the main components to building this form was a tab strip, but it required a lot of additional functionality. So I need to be able to tell like what tab people are on when they click next and previous, because there's validation happening. There's a lot of events occurring. So I need to trigger events when we're moving back and forth between tabs. So let's take a look at a basic tab strip. So I'm going to go open another project here. Actually, let's go to the start page. It's a little more organized, and I can find it a little more easily. I pinned it up here. So on this application, I've got a basic tab strip. And actually, let me switch branches here. So this is on a little more completed version. Here we go. Here's the basic version. We're going to build towards that more complete version in just a moment. So let's try to give this a run so we can see what it looks like. And this is a demo that Steve Sanderson put together. And it just shows off the new cascading parameters values and values that we have that came with Blazor 70. So we have a basic tab interface. We can click from tab to tab. Hey, Tofu Lock, thanks for subscribing, man. Trying to figure out what I'm gonna do for subscribers, and we'll have to put those subscriptions to good use somehow. So as soon as we get some additional folks up and subscribing, then we'll figure something out. So thanks a lot. Oh, thanks. Appreciate that, Tofu Lock. Oh, no problem. Thanks for watching the show, man. Appreciate it. So first and second tab here, or actually first and third, if we click this button, we can toggle the second tab. This is some Blazor magic happening here, but for all intents and purposes, we have a TabSet. So this is the parent component. And under the parent component, we have 3 child components, which are tab components. They have a simple property of title, which just displays the actual title on the tab. This one's wrapped in a if statement, which lets us toggle it with this checkbox that's bound to this value show second tab. This isn't a very real world scenario type of thing that I think you would see very often. It was more of a, this is a really cool thing that works in Blazor type of feature that Steve was trying to show off. So we're going to end up removing this out. I want to kind of show it as is though, because this is how it's built if you look at the latest release notes for Blazor. So I wanted to kind of start there. So we're going to remove that. We'll remove this label here too, and just say this is the third. So this is the third tab. And then we don't need this value anymore. Let's get that out of there. And now we're back to having a basic tab set here. And let's look at the code for this now. So under shared, we have a folder called tabs. And then we have TabSet. So TabSet has this cascading value component. Cascading value provides a way of getting data down the tree into the child elements that are within this control. So any children of this set of elements will be able to receive a value that we're passing in through this cascading values component. So we're passing in this. So in the context that we're talking about here, we're passing in the actual instance of the tab set that we're in. So the children have access to all of the public properties and functions that are in the component. So each tab underneath can call add tab, they can call activate tab, and so on. So we have a unordered list that will give us all of our tabs, and they also have the ability to set the active tab, which shows their own child content. So if we look at a tab, tab is just a list item. Let me put these side by side. So a tab is a list item, which will get loaded into this child content area here. So this is each one of these components will load into here as a list item and receive all of the values of the tab set. The tabs also implement this iTab interface, which just simply has a child content requirement on it. So any tab has to have child content. In this tab, we can have an on-click event called activate. And then it also helps toggle a class to show that it's active or inactive. And then it displays a title. To get the values out of this cascading value component, there's a cascading parameter on it that is a type of tab set. So this is where the tab set instance gets passed in to the children, and the name of that is container tab set. So that's the name of the parent control that we're passing in. So that's a property that gets set when the child component renders, it will get set from the parent. It also has the title that's being displayed, and then we have the child content that's being toggled on and off. The child content actually is displayed here in the body of the tab set. So this child content you see here is going to be all of the children that are part of the tab set, and then the child content here is the body of the actual tab that is active. Here we're toggling the CSS class that shows whether it's active or not. And then we have some methods. The first one is onInit. And when we initialize a tab, we're going to add that tab to the container, the parent. So we're going to pass this up the chain, which will then call this add tab method here and pass itself as a parameter, which adds the tab to the tab set and sets it to active if there are no active tabs. So when we initialize the tab set, on first pass, it's going to add the very first tab, and it's going to say, do I have any active tabs? I don't, they're null. So go ahead and set the active tab to the very first tab that you gave me. So the first tab will always be active. We also have a dispose method that comes from iDisposable. When we dispose of a tab and it's removed from the render tree, we're removing that tab from the parent component. So we call that, and if it's active, then we set active to null. That was what allowed us to toggle initially those tabs with that checkbox, was the ability to add and remove those tabs. The final one is activate. This gets triggered when we click on the tab title. So we click on the tab title, activate gets called. You can see the binding here on click activate. Activate gets called. It actually passes that method call up to the parent. So on the container, it calls set active tab, and it passes itself in and sets itself as the active tab if it's not already the active tab. Once that tab is set, it calls StateHasChanged, which updates the tab set. So that's the entire rundown of what happens here. Let's try to refresh this guy, see if it's still working for us. I just removed that toggle box from the second tab. So we can click through this. So you can see when the page rendered, this first tab is selected. And then when we click each tab, that set tab active is being called. So that method is being called, and that's what's setting these tabs and their child content to display. So when we do set tab active, this active tab child content gets rendered on the screen. So that's how those work. This is a good start to a component. So currently we can just toggle between these things, but there's no way to build any runtime activities with the way these tabs are now. There's no events, so we can't trigger an event to do anything like, for example, if we had a form or a value in here we wanted to validate, or if we wanted to programmatically go from one tab to the next from, say, another control, like a button or some other type of binding that programmatically changes these tabs. We have to forcibly click on them right now to change them. So what I want to do next is start building some more functionality into this tab set. And I've tried to do this quite a few different ways. There's no real set guidelines on how to build components right now because the framework is so new. So I'm going to walk through the steps that I used that were the most successful so far, and gauge any feedback that you guys have about how to build a more robust component than just something that's simple that we can click on, but something that has events and can give us feedback on like what the currently selected tab is. So let's try to do that. I've tried to implement this functionality at the tab level. That did not turn out well. I had a lot of issues with trying to keep track of what values are on the tab itself. I've tried to keep state in the main application and allow that to drive everything. That didn't quite work either. So I ended up putting a little bit of state inside of the tab strip. It does need to keep at least a little bit of application state or its own state anyway, to kind of keep track of what tabs are present in the tab set. And that will allow us to do things like get the active tabs index and trigger events and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to start with. So what I want to have on my tab set is I want to have the ability to say which tab is selected. So have a parameter up here that I can say selected, and I can bind to a value. So other components on the page, I'll put some dummy component out here, or let's just say input type number, and then we'll say bind some value here, and I want that value to be also bound here. Yeah, so you're just so I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Loop USA 87 says, yes, we need some local state inside the tab set. Yeah, that's what I've been finding, and that's a correct assumption. There is there's got to be some kind of state at the parent level of this component. So this is kind of the gist of what I want to accomplish. I want to have this thing that binds these two values together. So we'd have something like int selected tab equals 1, something like that. And then we could bind this value across those two items like this. Whoops. Oh, I copied the whole stack there. So we could do that. That's kind of my goal, is to have the ability to have a property here that I can bind on other components. Lupusa. All right. Hey, Brendan, welcome to the show, buddy. Brendanus has a great stream as well. If you haven't checked out Dev Chatter yet, make sure you pop over to Dev Chatter sometime. Hit follow up there. So it's a fun show to check out. He's making games and doing .NET stuff, and there's learning days and lots of good content there. Yes, Brendan, I think you do have me auto-hosted, and I have you auto-hosted as well. So we're going to try to build this binding across these two components here. And currently we don't have this, so I'm not going to be able to run this. Let's go ahead and just take that out for now. And this binding on the input box should work just fine. Let's go ahead and run. There we go. Dev Chatter is hosting. Thanks for hosting, Brendan. So this is the basic input box. We can click through the numbers, but notice nothing happens here. We don't have any binding. So we haven't tied anything to that yet. I just deleted that property off of that we were just kind of pseudo coding up here. Let's go into the tab set though and try to start working this out. The first thing we need is a place to put this parameter. So we come in here and say para. We could type it out this way, parameter, and just fully write this property out. But there's a nice little helper here. If you haven't seen this yet, you can type para, hit tab twice, and we'll get this parameter out here. And it's going to be an integer, and we want to call it selected. So that's going to be our first step, is getting that selected value. Currently, we're setting the active tab as an I tab. This doesn't give us any way. Lupus says it means wolf in Latin, and it's my teenage nickname. Oh, it's not related to USA. Cool. Ironically, I use my teenage nickname thing for gaming stuff. Sometimes those things stick with you. So we're going to next we need to figure out what this selected integer is, because currently we're using an I tab as the active tab, which works fine for selecting tabs. So when we click on these, using iTab to just identify which tab is invoking that method is fine, but it doesn't give us a way to identify which tab is selected from the outside of the component. The actual instance of the tab wouldn't do us too much good, because the tab itself doesn't have any other metadata in, and especially the iTab interface, which is being passed in as the parameter. All it has is child content, so all it knows of is the content that's within it. So we don't have an integer to actually bind here. So we need to do something in addition, this is where I said we're going to need some kind of state management in here. It's not a lot of state, and we want to try to keep that at a minimum, but we do need some type of state in here. So what we actually need to do is keep a count, or just keep a set of tabs, an array of tabs inside of the component, so we can kind of keep track of things. So that's what I want to add next. I'm going to say protected. So I'm going to keep this local to the, can tab have an ID? It could, but then we'd have to set the tab ID. So the question is, can the tab have an ID? If we did, we'd have to set a tab ID here somehow. And then we would have to also maintain an ID system somewhere, because each tab doesn't know about each other. So if tab 1 and tab 2 don't know about each other, and we add or remove more tabs from the tab set, then we still have to update those IDs somehow. We could set unique identifiers as well. That might work. It could get a little confusing programmatically to try to figure out how we'd have to keep some state somewhere to keep track of what those unique IDs are and how they relate to the tabs. I have gone down that rabbit hole of putting extra properties on tab. Please try those things out and let me know if it works out for you. I'm not saying the way I'm doing it right now is the best. I'm just saying it does work. There's no guidelines around how these things are made yet. So I'd like to see some other examples of how to do this, to compare perspectives and see which one gives us the most benefit. So for the meantime, I'm going to put a list in here. And I'm going to say list of iTab. And I'm going to take this list, I'm going to call it tabs. I'm just going to use something easy. And then I'm going to say is a new list of tab, or sorry, iTab. So we've got this collection that we can use. Why not just use the index of the tab in the TabSet container? Super Sniper, there is no index that I'm aware of when we use this cascading value here. It has children. The children are of a type of render fragment. I'm unaware of any way to query the render tree to identify the children that are part of a tab, or a part of a parent component. So the parent component, as far as I know, we have no way of accessing the rendered children that are within it. So that's the reason that I'm heading down the route that I'm on. I don't know of any code I can write in here. If we look at this dot, let's see if it'll give me anything. I may need to be inside of, let's see if I go inside of a method, if I can call something this dot. I have child content, which gives me back a property of child content. I can say child content, and I don't have, it's not a collection of anything. So I can't say child content dot count or anything like that. So it is just a render fragment. So I don't know of any way to get that data back from the parent in any way. So that's why we don't have an index to work with yet. Great question though, and if you have a way of doing that, please let me know how to do it, because I haven't discovered anything yet. But keep the comments and questions coming. This is a great question. That's what I discovered in my own time so far, is that I couldn't find a way. There's no API to grab the child information. You you can get the fact that there's a render fragment there and display it, but other than that, I can't find anything API-wise. So in this routine, we have add tab and remove tab, where we're adding and removing components, child components within the tab set. So we already have this. So what I can do here is say, when we add tab, we're going to do tabs.add, and we'll just shove this into the list. Oops, we want the value, not the type. So we can say add tab. So tabs.add tab. So it's going to add it to the collection. If it's active already, or if active is null, it'll set it to active. So that part can remain the same. We also want to make sure we can remove it. So we can say tab.remove, and then by interface, we'll just say, go ahead and remove that tab. So now we have some tabs that we can actually keep track of at least how many we have. It's still the iTab interface here, so there's not any other metadata except for the fact that it has child content, but that's fine. All we really want to do is get the index off of that value. So that's what I want to do next, is make this selected property actually do something. Right now it's just a property that sits there and it doesn't have any real data coming or going from it. So let's do that. Let's take this get method and extend this out. So I'm going to say get and set here, and for get, I'm just going to use a expression bodied member here to make this nice and short, because I'm going to say let's see. Actually, I need to do a little something else here first. I need a backing field. So let's do a backing field in here. We need to call a backing field called selected and get an integer value set up that we can track. So we need that as well. So we have our property that's auto implemented. We're going to explicitly implement something. So I'm going to say protected. This integer at first can be null, because as you can see, active tab can be null. When the component first starts rendering, it won't have any children in it. Until it calls add tab, it's going to be null. So we need to set up the backing field with a integer that can be nullable. We also want to do return selected. We want to make sure there is a value there when we return selected. So we can say get value or default, and I'm just going to throw back a -1 just in case there's nothing in there. I don't want this to throw an error and crash the entire application if for some reason selected gets called before its time. And then we need to be able to set selected. So we need to set this backing field, and we need to do that, and we can do that by doing set active tab. So we're going to call set active tab from here, because we want any component that's binding to this and setting the selected value needs to call this event or method, sorry, this method set active tab, and actually do the set as well. So right now we're calling set active tab from tab when a user clicks. That's the only way to change the tabs. When we bind data, we also want the tab to be set. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to call set active tab, and then when we do that, we'll say tabs. We want the backing field here, tabs. I'm typing this correctly. Why am I want this tabs. I'm going to say tabs, tabs value here. Why is my IntelliSense giving me issues? Let's ignore IntelliSense. Something's not quite right. It's the set. I don't have braces open around it, so it's throwing fits. There we go. So there we are. IntelliSense knew what it was doing. It was confused because I didn't know what I was doing. So we're going to say get return the selected or the value or the default. And then when we set it, we're going to say tabs, set the, get the index that's being passed in. And we're going to go into tabs and grab the tab at that index or the I tab and then pass that back into set active tab. So that's how we can accomplish this selected parameter that we're adding to the application or to the component. So if we go back into our index, now we can type in selected, and we can give it a binding of selected tab and bind that with the text box or the input box that we have on the page. This will not two-way bind by default, so this will actually be a one-way binding for now. And I think, let's see, are we to the point, I want to go back to TabSet, where we can actually try to run this and see what happens. I believe so. I think we're quite close to actually making this work. So let's give this a shot. Let's see if we get any errors that crop up with the current implementation here. And this is opening on another screen. Let's pull it back over to the main screen. And it looks like we have a white page, which usually means there's an error of some type, but there isn't. So let's see. Something's not allowing this to render on the page. We need to check and make sure that the provided, so it's probably hitting a null reference exception. Because when this renders out, it's going to initially set. So that's Lapusa. That's a great assessment of what's happening here. So what this the life cycle of this component, the TabSet gets spun up first before any child components are added to it. It tries to set the selected value. That actually ends up with a null reference because we're not checking to see, because it's going to actually call the set active tab immediately when that happens. There's no tabs in the collection to actually do that with. So we need to prevent that from happening. And we can do that through this add tab method here. Because when we add a tab, this is actually when this is actually going to be called. So when we add a tab, it immediately wants to set it to active. So what we have to do here is say if it's the current is null or tabs count -1. So we want to see how many items are in there. Let's see. Actually, we can do tab count is greater than 0 for now. That should work. So if it's greater than 0, then we'll go ahead and set an active tab. So that should clear up the problem. Make sure we have items in the collection before we even try to set that tab to active. Let's see if that fixes it up. And we're still running into some issue here. Trying to figure out why we're not seeing an error thrown in the console, which is surprising. Let's double check our code here real quick. We have a tab set on the index page. We have a selected value. The selected value is 1. Not sure why it's rendering nothing. We are in Blazor running server side, so we can actually run this guy. And when we run it, hopefully we get a break in our code where this error is occurring, since it's not throwing it in the console. And there it is. Index was out of range, so we're hitting that. Like I said, it's trying to set it. It's actually 0 here. There's no index, and it's trying to look for the value of 1 in here. So that's where our error is happening. So that lifecycle is going to be a pain. This is where we need to check to make sure that we've got a value. So we got to make sure there's a value in range to even do that that set active tab function. So we'll say if the tab count is greater than 0, then we can set the active tab. So there's our error. We can go ahead and rebuild, and now we should be able to run this successfully. And here we go. Interesting thing just happened. Let's try rerunning this again. We're setting, so this would be 0. This would be 1. This would be 2. For some reason, we're getting the last one selected. So that's an odd thing to be happening, but we are getting some data binding that's a little flaky, it looks like. So this is jumping around. Yeah, it seems like there's some kind of delay in there. Don't know what that's coming from. So if I'm on tab 0, I click up, I get 1. Click again, I get 2. Maybe there's just a little lag in the UI there. Maybe Blazor's having a little slowness repainting the tabs. Not sure why 2 is selected by default, or the third is selected by default, but we'll try to figure that out as we fix this. But notice the type of binding that we have is one way. So our input control, when the onChange fires, it updates the tab strip. But when we change the tab strip, it doesn't bind back to our input control. So that kind of throws things out of sync. We need to create a way to bind this back. To do that type of binding in Blazor, what we need to do is on the tab, the tab set, we have selected, we need to create a corresponding action. And this follows a convention. The convention is that if we have a property, so for example, the property name needs to also be followed by changed. So we need an action that has the property name changed, and our property is selected. So we'll have an action called SelectedChanged. Let's do para. It's going to be a parameter of action of an int. So it's an action of integer. That action type needs to match also the value type that we will get from the action. So now we have an action that takes the integer of the selected value. So we'll call SelectedChanged will actually, it should be implemented automatically by Blazor when we bind to it. However, we'll notice that there's some issues that I talked about very early in the show with the Blazor binding. Tofu says, this is a breath of fresh air after working with Angular for a few months. I wholeheartedly agree that Blazor is much more straightforward. The learning curve's a lot smaller. than Angular, and it reuses a lot of .NET terminology and methodology. So if you're a .NET developer, the learning curve is even far shorter. So we have the tab set. Let's go ahead and do these side by side for a sec. Let me get this out of the way. We're not using it. So I have my index page. I have selected. That is the parameter here, selected. What I want to do is do a two-way binding using this bind syntax on selected. So to do that in Blazor, we've created this SelectedChanged event. And when we say SelectedChanged, since we have a property name selected and an action named SelectedChanged, we can now use the bind syntax here and say bind dash selected. So that should give us two-way binding between this input box and the tab set, which Blazor will do. However, there's a bug right now. So let's rebuild this guy and you'll see what I mean. So what we'd expect is this would show the tab that is currently selected. When we go from tab to tab like this, it does not. When we do this, we see that it is changing. I think I figured out why that lag is there, by the way. I'm selecting an index that's out of range again. So there's an error being thrown and caught, which creates a little bit of a delay until I go back to something that's in range. So do we need to invoke this action or will it be automatic? It should be automatic. So let me explain what is actually happening and how it differs from what we expect to happen. So when I click on this tab, I'm invoking the onClick action, the onClick action on the tab. So I'm clicking activate. Activate calls up to the parent, which is TabSet, and it says activate tab or set active tab. It sets the active tab. The value changes, the property changes. It's firing an event called SelectedChanged, which we could capture and pull the index out of. We shouldn't have to. It's supposed to be automatically implemented in Blazor to change that value, which it does. So if we look back at our index, when that SelectedChanged event happens, it will update this value. It will update the value here, but it will update the value here on the input, but it doesn't refresh the view. So the actual page itself does not get refreshed. We could get around this and see if it's working. It may prove me wrong. I believe this is what's happening though. And there's other examples that I went over very early in the show that kind of did this as well. We can add a button on the page here, say on click. So I'm just kind of pointing out a bug right now. This isn't the way you'd implement anything. Let's call it refresh, because we want to refresh the UI here. So we'll just call that refresh. And we're going to create an event here, void. We'll call it refresh. And the only thing we're going to do here is say state has changed. And what state has changed does is tells the component to update itself. So we're saying go ahead and update your portion of the view, which is the tab set and these other controls within it. Go ahead and update all of this UI right here. So that's what we're doing here when we click this refresh button. So if I go back, we can easily point out this bug in the code where this is supposed to happen automatically, but it does not. So if we go back to, say, second tab, first tab, this should be 0, right? Refresh. So it's actually resetting it back to this value instead of doing the data binding. So there's an issue here. This is not how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to actually bind these two things together and kick off the event and change the values appropriately. So there's a way around this, and it gets a little kind of hacky, but it's what we have to deal with for now. There is an actual issue number on this. I'm going to see if I have it in my notes here. I've got some notes on this other screen I'm looking at. Yeah, I don't have those notes on me. There is an issue, though, and that issue number may change because they've moved repos. But there's an issue out on it right now, and the issue says to use dependency injection to shuffle the StateHasChanged method around, which is really clunky. Mr. Magoo, who was on the chat earlier, has a great example of how to fix this without having to do all that nonsense. So let's go back to the TabSet, and we can actually work with this issue that we have. And we need to on, actually there's two bugs in here. One is on my, one was my fault. So let's move this down so we get a little more code to view here. I'm missing some things to do on set active tab actually. We're not actually setting the selected state here, which we need to do. So I goofed here. So let's make sure we have all of our code right. We need to set the tab on here. So tab dot, we need to get the index of the tab that's being set in. So now when set active tab receives an iTab, it goes to the collection of tabs and it looks for the index and then sets the backing property. So that was something I was missing from the initial thing there. We also need to invoke this method that we haven't done yet. So what we'd have to do here is, now that we have a selected value, for the system to have access into it, we need to say SelectedChanged. If we don't have an event handler set up, we want to use this null operator. So if there's no action here, we want to do nothing. So non-op. If there is an action available, we want to invoke it. So we'll say invoke, and then we'll say selected, and we have to use value because it's a nullable int. So now we've completed our code. That's why when we clicked refresh, it still didn't help our situation any. So that should fix that problem. It won't fix the underlying Blazor bug though. So let's go back here. Let's click on some tabs, refresh. There we go. That's what I expected to happen. So this is how it should operate. When we click a tab, it should fire StateHasChanged and bind that value. It is not doing that. So this StateHasChanged isn't being called on the parent, which is the index page. We need to be able to fire this StateHasChanged off somehow. So that's what we need to do next. That should happen automatically. That's not happening. That is the Blazor framework bug. So we need to kind of do a little workaround here on the index page. And on the index page, let's see here. I'm trying to find my notes. Excuse me for a moment while I find where I've got this noted. There it is. So we need to set up a little bit of a proxy. TofuLock, thanks for joining the show. I will post a summary video, or I will post the entire video later. Also, like, post some highlights. The code is actually up on GitHub already. If you want to see the completed code, let me grab the repo for you, and I'll pop it into the notes if you're still around for another second here. Let's see, where's my chat room? I got too many tabs going here. All right. So if you want the finished repo, there it is. You may have to look under another branch to find the completed code, but you should be able to find the code there. I'll post everything on my Twitter and website later And you can come back to Twitch and see the video that you missed. So the index page, we need to go into the index page and set up a little bit of a proxy. We want to be able to call StateHasChanged without manually clicking on a button. Oh, awesome. Thanks again for following, subscribing, and we'll see you next week, Friday at noon. So we have this selected tab. We just need to wrap it in a property. The property will help give us a way of kicking off that StateHasChanged method. So we'll set up a property. We'll call it SelectedTab. And then we're going to set a get and set method explicitly here. And for get, again, I'm just going to use an expression body member. It's going to be in one line of code. We're just going to take the selected tab. So that's all we want to do there. Just return that value that's already here. To set it, we want to say selected tab is value that comes in. And then when we set the value, I'm forgetting my curlies again. So let's get some curly braces around this because we have two things to do in the set method. When we set the value, we're just going to call StateHasChanged. So this is a workaround to getting this to work. Now we don't need this refresh method. We don't need this button. It should work just fine. We do need to update our bindings though, because we're binding to the backing field. Instead, we want to bind to the property now. So now we're just kind of proxying through this property, the get and set, so we can trigger StateHasChanged. This is a workaround. In hopefully the next version of Blazor, a very recent update, we'll see this fixed and we won't need this code. It should just work as is. For now, we need it. So this should finalize the tab strip and do that binding that we are getting. So now we can see it's bound to the second one. We can click through the tabs and we're getting our update. So now we can programmatically get and set the tab. There's still some like tidying up to do. There's some extra work that we can do to make this a lot nicer. But for the most part, had a suggestion, never mind. If it's a suggestion for the component, maybe I just covered it. But if you have a suggestion for the show, actually have a repo. If you scroll down on the Twitch page there's a repo you can click on and drop suggestions there if you want to see something done with the way the show's handled, the timing of the show, questions for me in general. You can pop those there. If it's something I can answer now, though, feel free to drop it in chat. So we're able to bind those values programmatically back and forth between these two controls in a two-way binding type of fashion. Notice I'm purposely avoiding hitting -1 and going past the TabSet here. It makes it kind of breaks things. There's probably errors in the console, I'd imagine. Maybe not. I'm not getting error reporting. I think this is an isolated incident here. Usually there's all kinds of redness blowing up in here if you do something wrong. So not sure why the errors aren't coming up, but we don't need to capture them. I know this is throwing an out of index, out of range error and stuff like that. So we can make this nicer now. Also, when the tabs are rendered, notice that when I set the selected tab to 1, even if I set this to 0, we're going to have the same problem here that the last tab is always selected. I'll explain why that's happening. So the last tab is selected by default now. Initially, when we first started building this, the first tab was selected, and it's kind of ignoring this here. This is something I'm trying to figure out a best practice in working around. So we have a tab set. The life cycle of the TabSet is that TabSet renders. When any component renders, we have a, we can override this here. We can say override on init. So we can say on init, do something where we could say, go ahead and set this value and so on and so forth. The problem is when we're doing this on init, the children aren't there yet. We can also do override on after render. The problem with that one is every time you call StateHasChanged, it calls on after render. That's not a one-time event that fires. So there's no way to really say all of my children have loaded, so go ahead and set this value to 0. There's no way really to do that through the framework that I know of. So that kind of sets us up for kind of a little issue here, which we can actually work around. So let's go back and improve this a little bit more. And we'll add some safeguards in here so we can't go out of range. And we'll do some additional work to make that bug go away. So we'll need to go back to the TabSet again. I'm going to move this guy back to full screen here. Let's see, I'm going to keep this selected tab at 0 for now. And everything there should work as is. And I'm trying to find in my notes again where I am at. So give me 1 second here. Okay, so in my tab set, we're going to add some new code. And one thing I want to do is kind of safeguard around this selected. So for one thing, we'll never have a value that is less than 1. So we can say in here value must be greater than 0, and also the count must be greater than 0. We could also say that it has to be, this will do essentially the same thing. So we can say count, it has to be within 0 to 1. Or 0 to, sorry, the max number that we've counted. What's going on here? Oh, sorry, value equals. So now the value has to be between these two. It has to be greater than 0 or it has to be less than the total count of elements that are in the index or in the collection, or it'll throw that out of range exception that we don't want. So let's see here. The question from the chat room, loops is when add is called, it changes selected index. So what happens? It happens at tree. It happens three times or 3 times, and the last one gets selected, and we lose the original value. Yes, that is true. So each time these values are added, we're calling this set active tab, which so when we add it, we're selecting it, and that's the reason that we're getting the last one selected. If I were to come in here though, and I said, give me selected index of 3, or 2 rather. So what if I wanted to set that last one by default? What would happen is TabSet renders, it tries to call this, but it's out of range, so it does nothing, doesn't select anything. And then let's see here. Let's try. So it's always going to be the last one anyway. Let's do 2 or 1. Let's try to set that middle tab. Yeah, it's still doing it that way. Yeah, so it's calling that. It's calling the set tab function when there is a tab available. It keeps calling it until it ends up at the last one. So there's a little issue there. So let's see here. We could say inside of here, this guard got moved up to this area here. So we could say when we add the tab, so it says add tab. If it's active, then, or if there's not an active tab, make this tab the active tab. We could also say if it's not the selected index, we could do that. What I ended up doing after trying a couple different methods of working this out, for the meantime, till I can find a better solution, what I've done is come back and added a new parameter. This is going to take some more experimenting to kind of get everything working perfectly. So this might be a temporary thing that I've done. I've got default tab. So this gets around the issue of it adding and incrementing on its own, and it also gets around the issue of it hitting an out of range exception while it's doing this, which it's guarded, but it'll just kind of fail flat and not do anything. So this keeps it from having like a no op type of situation when it's doing its first render. So in here we can say if the value of if the tab count -1 is equal to the default tab, tabs count. There we go. We'll go ahead and set the active tab. So that was another idea. That's a good suggestion. Loops says we need a bool value that says is loaded, and set it true on after render, and do the selected change if the value loaded is true. So we could do that. We could come into TabSet, and we could set it up to so the first time it renders, it gives us a value that says, okay, it's already been rendered once. One of the reasons, and this is really petty, that I didn't do that is because it reminded me a lot of web forms. It's like kind of like the is post back scenario all over again. And I was just like, that may be something that I end up trying though. So this does work here. We can say default tab is we could say 0. So we could set the default to 0. So it doesn't matter what our initial value here is. We can go ahead and run this. And there's our 0. So that setting the default actually does work. So that's one way of working around it. So I need to try some more implementations of this and see if I can get it to work by setting the value here in code. That'd probably be ideal. But for now, this did solve the problem. So this will actually be out on GitHub if anybody wants to fork it and try to fix that issue. And we've also fixed this where we can go past this number and it doesn't break anything. Or does it? It looks like it's still throwing some kind of issue there because it didn't come back to where I imagined it would. We can set a break, or we can run in debugging and see where that's happening. I thought I had a good guard on this though. So there needs to be some improvement on this out of range scenario as well. So the guard needs to be better. For the most part, this solves many of the problems though. So we could actually add buttons in here, like I have in my, if I wanted to add a wizard in here and do a stepwise form. So if I had a process where I wanted to have buttons here, or I could click next and back, I could add those in as well. Can we bind min and max values for input based on how many tabs we actually have? I don't know if that's something that's available. I don't know if we could have, I mean, we could create a custom input that has the min and max value. Excuse me. So we could wrap this in a custom control and say min max. I don't think there's a HTML5. Oh, maybe there is max value. What we don't have, if we wanted to do this, what we don't have, we have the selected index. What we don't have is the count of tabs. We can get the count of tabs and expose that as a property, but we don't have it right now. So that's something that we could set up if we wanted to take this and add a value here that was, I don't know what you would call this, tab count maybe, to expose that out outside of the parent control, because right now it's stuck within the TabSet. Tabs is a private field. So we don't have that. What we also could do here is we have an onChanged event that we could bind to buttons and things. We could also say, we can do, since we've built it this way, we can say SelectedChanged, and we could capture an event and do things on that. So we could say void selected, or on SelectedChanged. This actually takes an int of index. So we could actually call this event from the TabSet. This is something that's already available. And we could say if we could put validation code in here, for example. So if we had form controls within one of the tabs, we could run validation based on that tab index. So each time you change tabs, something happens, and it either allows you to go to the next tab because it validated, or it keeps you on the current tab because you're not validating that data yet. So that gives us some additional flexibility, this SelectedChanged event. So that's nice. We do have that. I'd like to see how people extend this out though and build additional things like Loopsa suggested, with like how do you tell how many tabs you have? I mean, you could even put in here a property of tabs, and that tabs field could be the exposed list of tabs. So you could query that and get the count from it. So that's another thing that could be done here. It depends on how much state you want to keep and how many properties you want to expose and so on. So I'm kind of interested in how people might use something like the TabSet, what APIs they'd like to see built, or what properties they'd like to see added into this, to how how robust do you need a tab set to be? So that's something I'd like to see people extend and make examples out of and see what they can do. So let's do like one more thing with this. I want to show a little more deep dive into what we can do with components. So let's go and look at how the tabs are set up here. We have an iTab, we have tabs, and we have TabSet. The code for everything is in one file. This doesn't have a lot of code, so it's not too bad. When you start hitting something like this, it gets to be a bit messy. And there's also some issues where the functions area here doesn't format correctly. I just did a Control-K, Control-D, and it doesn't indent this, which can get quite annoying from time to time. So I want to show how to do, how to move this code out to another file. And what we can do is we can come up to our tabs, we can click Add, New Class. And I think this will be the last thing I do for now. The completed code is up on GitHub, and I'll try to add some more ideas to it as time goes on, and maybe we'll revisit it again next week and see if there's a way to get around that default tab property and maybe expose some more functionality out of this thing. So we need to create a class that contains all of the code that will be our quote code behind for this. I'd like to say TabSet component. So I'm going to have a TabSet component, which is going to be all of the code from my TabSet. And I'm just going to take all this code out, cut this right out of here, and I'm going to paste it in this class file. So I have my TabSet component, and I'm going to need some using statements in here, so I'm going to control click around a little bit, get my parameters available to me. And then I also need to come in to the class declaration up here, and I need to inherit from Blazor component. So if I inherit from Blazor component, which I need to bring in the using statement for that as well, now everything stops giving me the red squiggles. And I can go back, I can save this, go back to my tab set, and my code is gone, so now I have these additional red squiggles to deal with. I can come up to the top of my component and say at inherit from TabSet component. And I'll give it some time to catch up. It should. There goes one. Child content is still showing for some reason. Interesting. Let's see. I've got my render fragment here. Don't know why. Let's try saving. Save, rebuild. See if that goes away. Oh, due to protection level. That's another thing that we need to deal with. I didn't use protected here. So now that we're inheriting, it needs to be explicitly set to protected. There goes the error away, and all of the code is now tucked nicely away into the TabSet component, and we don't have to see it here. And we don't have to worry about that function formatting thing anymore. So we've got our TabSet code here. We can do a remove unused using statements. Save that guy. It's nice and tidy now. And we can control F5 and rerun our app, and everything should be working just like it was before. And moving that code did no harm. So that's one way of getting that set up. Let's see. What branch am I on in here? Okay, so I'm on my master branch. I've got the completed project in here. I'm going to show that next. So this will jump ahead a bit to where everything is on GitHub. I'm actually going to come in and just undo all of the changes that I've made because I actually have done this before. So undo all these changes, put the project back in its original state, delete that file I don't need. I'm going to go to the GitHub repo and jump ahead to the most recent version that I have up on GitHub. So if you go on GitHub, this is what you'll find. I've done some extra commenting and stuff in this file. So if you go up there, this is what you'll see in the show notes. I want to show everybody around in case you go download this and try to play with it. It's essentially the same thing. So if I control F5, you'll see the same app come up. Added a little bit of text around this text box that says tab selected, and that lets us select our tabs as we did before. Let's see what else was unique about this is I moved all the components out to their own file. So in the example when I started, we were under shared, and all of the components were under a folder in shared. In this GitHub repo, I moved everything out to components, and under components, there's a folder called tabs, and you'll see the iTab interface, a tab markup file, and a TabSet markup file. So we've got two Razor files here. What you'll notice is the code behind is gone. So there's no code for the tab, and there's no code for the TabSet. Remember, I moved these to a code behind page, and I've got my TabSet component, and in tabs I have a tab component. That's where the code is. So where is that code in this tree? If I look at my project, I can control click here on this, and you can see I can open the code behind. So that's one way to find it, is by control clicking on the class name within the actual view code itself. So in the CS.html file, control click will take you to the code behind for it. That's one way to get in there. And this is the completed code with full comments and all the nice bells and whistles. But if you look in Solution Explorer, this is a really cool trick, so pay attention. I've got a tab and a tab set, and I've got code behind files tucked nicely away behind the markup. So I've got tab CS.html, tab set CS.html. Those are nicely embedded in here. And my code behind is tab CS beneath it and tab set CS beneath that. How I did that is, first of all, the file name is slightly different from the class name. I know this is kind of not the best practice ever. People tend to write the file names out, so tab component.cs should be the file name. I'm still working on a way of doing this nesting without kind of breaking that convention, but I changed the file name to match the markup. So tab CS.html, tab CS, and then I've got this file nesting.json file. So this is a IDE settings file, and under dependent file folders, you'll see I'm adding an extension, and this just maps two extensions together. And it says wherever I have a CS file with the same name as a CS.html file, go ahead and nest those things together. And that's how that works. So that's just kind of a cool way to tidy up those components and make it a little bit easier to navigate inside of your project structures. So a little tip of the day there. So that's going to wrap things up. And if you want to grab the code for this, it's on GitHub. Let me get the link to that. I may have posted it in the chat here once already. Let's go ahead and pull it up on GitHub though. So here's the code here. we'll go to this file, and I'm going to paste this into chat. In the file, you'll notice there's several branches. If you go on advanced selection, this is where I was working on the advanced selecting the tab features, and you'll find the application in here. So all the components are under this components project, and under tabs, you'll find all of the code and all of the markup. So that's where you can find all of the good bits there. I will merge this into the master branch sometime very soon. I kept the master branch in the default way that it was implemented, so I could show how I progressed into this branch here on the show today. So after the show is over, I am going to eventually merge this back into the master. That will become the master page. So master branch, rather. So thanks everybody who jumped into the show today and all the comments. I'm going to have to go back through some of the comments here and see if I can implement some of those ideas. There were some good suggestions about how to get around the TabSet default tab scenario. I'm going to have to try that one out and see what I can make happen with that. But this was the state that I left it in before the show today. So thanks for the feedback. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Janescu says adding a razor page, then a view, but making the page model to Blazor component. I'm not sure what you're asking or stating there, Janescu. Like adding the razor page in the view, but making the page model to the Blazor component. Are you talking about the file nesting that I've got going on here? Where you can open up the CS HTML is nested, nesting the CS underneath. Do you want to see that reversed? Is that what you're suggesting? Not quite sure. If you wanted to see, you could customize this. The nesting file here is completely custom. It's not automatic. Now, if I take this file out, I'll actually just do a cut real quick. So if I cut this code out of the JSON file and save, notice this is the default mode. This is by default what Visual Studio does. And I've got separate files. Tab and tab CS.html are both separate files. When I add this file nesting.json in here and add this code, then it reverts back. Here, let me pull it up at the same time. You can add a razor page. Oh, razor pages. Oh, so you're talking about, let's do tab, add, new item, razor page. Let's see what kind of nesting they use. So razor pages has, if you do cs.html.cs, it automatically takes care of that for you. Okay, so we have index model, and then the page is index model. So if I went back in, let's delete that index page out of there. Delete. I thought I'd seen this somewhere before. Thanks for bringing this up. If I go in here and say tabs .cs.html.cs, and I remove this file. Let's remove that out of there. Save. That still automatically handles that. So nice add there, Janescu. That totally works. So just this actually has a built-in file like this then, and there's a different extension that you can add here. It's called like path prefix or something like that, and it's essentially the same filter that they use for example, like if you have a JavaScript file and then you have a map.js or something like that, or CSS file, CSS, and you have a map that goes to like a SAS file or something like that. So it's the same idea. They've got one of those built in for Razor pages, apparently. So that's pretty cool. I'll have to rip that file nesting out and change the naming structure here and push that back up to the GitHub page. So thanks for the suggestion. Good one. Let's see here. Any other feedback before we go? I will kind of drop a mention here that if you're on the if you're on the Twitch stream now, down below where you're viewing, there's a link to a GitHub repo, and I'll paste it here in the chat as well. So if there's something show related you want to add feedback on, I have a GitHub page. Just post an issue in here. There aren't any yet. If the show's too long, too short, sound was bad, the mic quality's not great, whatever you guys want to kind of pop in here to see if I can help improve the show somehow, feel free to drive some feedback that way. And then also feel free to join at any time and post comments in the chat room during the show. So thank you everybody that joined the show today. I'll post some show notes very soon on my personal website at edcharbonneau.com. You can find all of the past shows in the show notes from those. I'll post some things here shortly. The GitHub repos we worked on today. Mr. Magoo's really nicely structured sample project for learning about data binding. All that I'll put in here. So you can find out more. So thanks once again for another successful episode of Blazor StateHasChanged. And we'll see you again next Friday at noon. Not sure what we'll talk about. Hopefully there's some news during the week that we can dig into. We'll maybe continue this tab strip component as well and add some more functionality to that as we go. So thanks again, everybody. Enjoy your weekends.